Welcome back to another episode of Rival and Queen. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Sarah.
This week, Sarah, we are doing things a bit differently. We are really excited about re-releasing excerpts from episodes with Tyler Simmonds and Verena Rizg. Considering the state of the world and what's happening, we know more than ever it's so important for our community to hear these voices and these conversations we had previously with Tyler and Verena.
Totally. I think, the last few weeks, we've become so much more aware globally of really like racial injustice, and the Black Lives Matter movement is, I think, woken us up in a deeper way than ever before, at least me personally.
I know, and that's probably what a lot of people are feeling. And part of the problem is that because we did support people, we did speak up when needed, and we're allies, that wasn't enough. Do you know what I mean? It's just something that we have to continuously be aware of, the things and terrible, like what we see in the United States and still in Canada, that these things are still happening, and because people aren't doing enough.
Well, I think more than ever, through what's been going on the last few weeks, I'm not articulate at all in this, but I've realized like the role that I can play, and that we can play, and that it's important that we actually speak up and start being more purposeful and more action oriented in this. And I think maybe one of the biggest things I notice with myself is like, I've been such an advocate for female owned businesses and women entrepreneurs, but I'm not that same advocate for Black owned businesses and supporting them in the same way. And so that's been a huge realization, just like a very easy one that was like an immediate click for me, and important to make. And so, we've been reflecting, both of us, I know, and having conversations the last 2 weeks about how we can change our own behavior, and also how we can be better allies through the podcast for Black voices. And I think in this episode, really, we wanted to let Tyler and Verena share their messages, and we've spoken to them about this stuff before, right? And we've been very fortunate that they felt comfortable opening up to us about their lives and like where they grew up in their communities, and really their own personal experiences with racism. And really the thing I love, I cannot even express so much, I feel like, about Tyler and Verena is they have so much compassion, so much empathy, and truly as humans, they are calling people in. Mm-hmm. And they each do that so well. And it's not their job. Like, God loves them so much. Verena, Tyler, we love you. But they do that so well and guide us in how to have like these crucial conversations. And this is why we want to reshare their episodes with everyone today.
Absolutely. And their Instagram live they did together yesterday was so nice. You can just tell that they're such great friends and know each other so well. But to your point, Verena even used an example of how she chooses to see love, that maybe someone else did something, but she chooses to kind of see that loving side and try and give everyone kind of the benefit of the doubt and think of them just in such a positive way. Like, she's just such a good human being. And she even talked about some of her clinician experiences. And Verena is a nurse practitioner, clinician, poet, singer, songwriter, and many, many talents, Sarah, many talents. But she even talks about how in her day-to-day life, being a clinician, how she experiences these things all the time. And it made me feel so sad just to hear her share those stories, and that in the instances that she spoke about, how her colleagues didn't even really speak up and kind of support her. And that's, I think, the biggest part of the problem, that people just say nothing. Like, they just stand there in silence as if they don't know what to say. But really, you just need to say something, just even by saying, that's wrong. Please, you cannot say that. you don't treat other human beings like that. And I think that we just get uncomfortable and people don't say anything.
Yeah, we're learning our way, and we're learning how to use our voices to help support um, all of our Black friends in the Black community and this movement. We are going to make mistakes. You and I are going to make mistakes, but we need to be a part of this, and we want to be, is the bigger thing, right?
Yeah. And it's like, get uncomfortable, get in those conversations and just start to learn, because by staying quiet and staying in our comfort zones, how is that going to change anything? That's nothing. That's been happening for far too long. And it's time people start opening up and doing what they can. And it's
Speaking
not
out.
going to change overnight, but I think that what's happening is going and needs to be a big shift in just since society in general to make where we live a better place.
So today we're going to reshare episodes from Tyler Simmonds, who is a public speaker and filmmaker. He grew up in North Preston, and he does talk about growing up in North Preston in this episode, actually, and his love for his community. And we've also have Verena, who, as you mentioned, she is a nurse practitioner. She's a Sudanese Egyptian, and she really shares her experiences growing up. And also, she breaks it down with love, how we can start having crucial conversations.
Yeah, I'm really happy that we're redoing this, because they're lovely and it's a great conversation.
They guide us better than anyone.
100%. And this won't be the last time we'll be speaking with them, for sure.
No. And so before we dive in, for everyone listening, I just want to reshare some of resources that we talk about in these episodes. Tyler has these fantastic meditations that Ashley and I rave about. You'll hear all about it. And you can access those at tylersimmonds.com. Verena references the Awoken Word podcast episode with Jeff Perera called Mankind, Kind Men. We'll share the links for these in the show notes. And also the Boys Don't Cry podcast by BZLY is another conversation between Verena and Tyler, which is really good. And as Ashley mentioned, Verena and Tyler had a conversation this week, which you can you can watch on Verena's Instagram on her IGTV. And as well, Sickboy podcast re-released their interview with Verena. So we hope you really get value from this episode. We know you will. It keeps on giving. And if you want more, go and explore these other resources. All right, let's dive in.
Let's do it.
That too. And being a Black man from a Black man with mental illness and a Black man from North Preston, it was really tough for me, because I had these moments where I was like, oh, I have to make sure people don't think that I'm soft. I have to make sure that people don't think that I'm crazy because of the mental illness thing. And I have to keep it together so much, and it gets so exhausting. And at one point in my life, around the age of 26, is when I was like, you know what? I'm just going to be myself. And if I need to cry, I'm going to cry. If I feel hurt by something, I'm going to express it. If I want to dress a certain way, I'm going to do it. I don't care.
Was there a moment in time when that actually hit you? You said a few years ago when you realized this is kind of, the wrong way, or the way you.
When I really realized that was going on was when I was 26, and I'm 30 now. I didn't really know what to call it until a couple of years ago. But when I was 26 is when I was just getting over a lot of tragedy in my life, and a lot of a breakup, and a lot of really hard times. I was in a deep depression, and a part of me was like, do I want to stay here? Like, do I want to stay here on Earth and stay alive? And my answer, and I had this thought a few times in my 20s. I was thinking, oh, do I actually want to stay here? But this time it was different. I felt it so deeply that I just didn't fit in the world. And although it was a really, really dark time in my life, it definitely brought out the brightest moments of my life, because it was this mentality of, okay, if I'm going to stay here, I'm going to become the best person that I can be. And I'm going to live every single day like it's the last. I'm going to tell people I love them if I love them. I'm going to tell people that I'm sorry. I'm going to own up to my shit. I'm going to just be accountable, and I'm going to be authentic. And that was when everything changed.
That's really nice.
It almost sounds like too that you were, we can talk about this more, but obviously you were in a dark time, if that's what you were kind of considering. Yeah. And it sounds a little like that you were kind of at the position where you're like, well, this isn't going to work. Like, what the alternative is at that point.
Yeah.
Well, you probably just don't feel like you're being your true, authentic self, because all those things you're thinking and feeling just keep getting pushed down because you don't feel like you have the space to express them.
Exactly. I would actually just let people say things to me, and they would really affect me. This is one of the big things that I had to change about myself. They would really affect me, but I would never tell people. And I realized just how much that was damaging me. And then I just became this person that's like, hey, if something is bothering me, or if somebody does something I don't like, there's this thing called boundaries, and you need to start using those.
Tyler, tell us, so you've alluded to this a bit in our conversation, but you are a filmmaker.
Yeah.
Right now you've got a few big projects on the go.
I do.
One of which is a new documentary that you're working on.
Mm-hmm.
You want to tell us a bit about that one?
That is, there's soul in our soil. And I'm working with Ingrid Waldron and Jade Tynes on that. Ingrid Waldron, she's a professor at Dalhousie. She does a lot of research on environmental and systematic racism. She actually co-produced There's Something in the Water for Ellen Page. And Jade, she is the assistant producer on Digstown. And then I have Paul McCurdy, who's the camera guy, who's amazing and just makes things look beautiful. And so what we're all doing with this film is we're looking at my life, and again, with the whole human thing, like I have so many different aspects of myself. Like we all have so many different aspects of ourselves. And this is me exploring the part of me of growing up in North Preston, a mainly all Black community, and a community where we've experienced a lot of racism and have been treated differently than a lot of people outside of the community. And we really want to talk about how that can affect individuals in the community, and how much trauma that has caused, really. There was a film that came out about the community, I think it was last year, and it showed a side that wasn't something that I wanted to see.
Flattering, maybe.
Yeah. But I felt that film was it was what their vision was, and my vision is different from that. I want to, instead of people seeing my community as like this place filled with crime and people that do things wrong, like, let's peel back layers and figure out even why some of that stuff happens. And once I started thinking in that way and wanting to understand that, I kept going back to, oh no, we deal with a lot of racism. We've been through a lot as a community, and that needs to be addressed.
Mm-hmm. Could you share, like, obviously this is not something that Ashley and I can relate to on a firsthand experience, mm-hmm. like straight up. Can you, two white girls. Yeah. Like I grew up in Newfoundland part of the time. Could you share, like, what are some of those examples of what you would have experienced growing up there?
One thing that just popped into my head, it's when I first applied for a job, I was told, never put North Preston on your resume. That was a normal thing to me until my mid-20s. I was just like, oh, no, I just am not supposed to put it on my resume. I didn't even stop to think about it, because I remember as a kid even hearing people saying things like, yeah, you're not going to get the job if you put North Preston on the resume. And it's something that still happens. There's still people in the community who won't put that they're from North Preston on the resume because we believe that people will not give us the position that we're applying for. And so even just that one thing, in growing up, believing that it's impossible to get a job if people know where I'm from.
That's crazy.
It just also, like, your self-esteem in that, like, there's no, how do you feel pride? Like, you almost feel like you can't be proud of where you live.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like, especially with the film or documentary you referred to before that didn't show North Preston in a good light, like, do you think it just is such a misunderstood place that people just don't really know as much about it?
It's a very misunderstood place. It is. With that project, a lot of people from the community were a part of it. And since then, I spoke to a lot of them, and it was really good conversation, because I was upset about that film. I didn't want this cycle to continue of mm-hmm. people, like, I didn't want the stigma of being from North Preston to just grow more and more. And this was me feeling sad for the kids in North Preston and thinking, oh my gosh, they have to go through life, and people referencing this film that's making our community out to be this just like crime infested place.
And probably because it hasn't changed. If that's something you experienced and then you're hearing it now, you're probably wondering when is someone going to change
exactly
script.
So what are you wanting to highlight in your project, like There's Soul in Our Soil?
What I want to highlight is that these are good people. And I like to believe that most people are good people. Some people were dealt a bad hand, and some people were fed these beliefs about themselves. So they felt that living a certain lifestyle was the only way that they could live, because people made them believe that they could never work a regular job or
couldn't get a job.
Yeah, exactly. And because a lot of the blame goes on North Preston. It goes on the people of North Preston. and this is me just putting this film out there and talking about this stuff. I'm just like, wait, let's hold on a second. Instead of putting the blame on North Preston and the people of North Preston, are we going to think about the people who are making us feel like we can't get the jobs? Are we going to talk about the people who don't come into the community because they're afraid, or when there's nothing to be afraid of because people will just wave at you and want to know who you are if you go there. Because no one from outside really comes in. But the people who do, people are always like, oh, who's that? And they want to get to know you.
And why do you think that is, Tyler? Because I just want to touch on that point. Sarah's from Newfoundland. I'm from the Annapolis Valley, and we both grew up in small towns. But my husband is from Cole Harbour. I knew nothing about North Preston or Preston, absolutely nothing. And then you kind of hear socially these things and that you shouldn't go there. It's not a safe place. And you're just saying that people don't go there. And is that because these kind of stories of whatever the reputation is have just kind of continued and people don't know really about the community at all?
Yeah, it's media is powerful. It's really powerful, and it can cause fear. And things happen in North Preston, but things happen everywhere. I know for a fact, just from growing up in North Preston, I know that it's not like, oh, crime rates through the roof. No, like I used to walk around as a kid in North Preston. It wasn't bad. It was actually really fun because everybody knows each other. And we're all family, like almost everybody's family.
It's like a small town in a city tucked away.
Yeah.
Interesting. It's interesting to think about it, like in Ellen Page's documentary, I watched that, and that's just solely one influence, but just actually talking about the different influences like outside factors can have on communities and how they actually are able to thrive or grow. And like she covered totally like access to water and things like that and how that affects, people's livelihood, their health, their ability to work, all those things, and kind of can keep you in a down place.
Definitely. It's psychologically, like the effect that can have on you. When I was in school, I remember if I had a crush, I would tell them that I'm from Cole Harbour.
No.
And this was like a regular thing that would happen with like friends of mine. Would be like, yeah, we're from here. Like we would never say North Preston because of the stigma attached to it. And that's how I grew up. And then I grew up with, mental health. That's stigma too. So it was like these things piled up on top of each other. And so I just feel like I need to just fight against those stereotypes and show people, no, it's not what you think it is. In this way of not being condescending and not like treating people like they mean harm. I understand that there are people who have certain thoughts about the community because that's what they were taught. In my mind, I'm not thinking, oh, you're a terrible person. I just want to sit down and have a conversation. And we don't even have to talk about the community. Let's just have a conversation. And chances are you'll be like, oh, this is North Preston? Like this person that I was talking to who really cares about me and is actually a good person. And that's really the meaning to all of this stuff that I do, like with the talking about mental health and the filmmaking, like with the projects that I do. it's just showing up and having compassion. And
well, it's so important too, because like you said, you grew up in that community, which you said right away, you've got a stigma attached to you, and you've got mental health issues that you kind of deal through. It's like there's other people like you. So it's incredible that you're actually taking the time to become or voice what people may not be strong enough to express.
Yeah, pave the way.
Yeah. Thank you.
Going to be awesome and so brave of you to talk about and share all these things with all of us.
I have a pure curiosity question. How are you working with Ellen Page on the documentary?
She's a mentor, and she's just very, like, extremely passionate and gives really good guidance. When we met, it wasn't what I was expecting. And it was just really interesting. She just really cared about what I had to say. And I'm an Ellen Page fan. Like, I love Juno. One of my favorite movies. So I was like, oh my gosh, I'm meeting this amazing celebrity. And she was telling me how she's such a fan of me and such a fan of people who do good work in the community. And it just felt so right to even have her in my corner, and to know that I can just reach out to her and say, oh, I'm stuck on this part of my film and I feel like I don't know what to do. And she can respond and just be there for me. It feels really good.
I mean, that's like just super badass that she's your mentor. Like, think about in the world of who mentors could be. Congratulations, Tyler. I feel like you won a jackpot.
Thank you.
I love that. You also, in the last few days and weeks, have been very busy while in isolation, and you launched a new project just a few days ago.
I did. Yeah, my therapist tells me that I should not work so much. So I'm working on it. But
You're working hard on it.
I'm working hard on not working. I'm trying my best. But I've been doing a lot of like reading on Stoicism more lately and stuff, and just thinking about how much meditation means to me. And I really want to share with the world like how much that means to me. And I realized the way that I want to do it is by creating stillness is key. It's this new thing that I started, and I'm doing these guided meditations. I already have a bunch of guided meditations that I created. I just have to locate them on my hard drive. And I'm going to be sharing a lot of those on, I'm calling it the Stillness Project, and just helping people meditate. And I'm not gonna be like charging people for it or anything. I'm just putting it up on the website and they can listen.
I listened to 2 today and I friggin' love them.
Oh, thank you.
They're so good. And I have to say, like, even as someone who meditates a ton, and I typically meditate in pure silence, but the last 2 weeks, I've started to do a few guided meditations, and it's a really nice kind of switch up at this time to just actually take myself out of the space I would normally be in and like let someone else bring me into a new space or a new kind of concept, which is, I'm enjoying them. I recommend them.
See, I need the guided meditations because I think when you're starting, you kind of need the coaching.
They're good to start. Yeah. Try Tyler's. They're dope.
I'm going to. I saw those on his website. I'm gonna dive into those.
I'm so happy that you like them.
Oh, I like, and the music in them is great. Like I
love music.
I was also just listening to them in the background as I work because it was so soothing.
Well, that's amazing.
the last few days I've put on, I think it's Amazon's like Calm Spa or meditation channel, just listening to the music all day while I'm working. It just makes me feel happier. The little chimes and the rain.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Verena?
Sure. I'm Verena. I'm a singer, songwriter, spoken word poet. I'm a nurse practitioner, so I'm a clinician, and I'm also an artist, and I'm Sudanese Egyptian, so I'm a child of immigrant parents, the most incredible parents, human beings.
I love that.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate.
That's awesome. And did they immigrate here when you were a child, or were you born here?
I'm the only person in my family born in Canada.
Okay.
I was born out west, but have been in Nova Scotia since I was about 14. Nova Scotia's home.
That's nice.
Yeah.
So what brought you guys here from out west to the East Coast?
Oh, I'm glad that you asked. So, my father's my favorite human being. He's my best friend. And he's just the most remarkable person I've ever known. And he's a priest. He's an Orthodox priest. So we're Coptic Orthodox Christian. And the Orthodox Church is the oldest church in the world. And Coptic means ancient Egyptian. So my father started the first Coptic Orthodox churches in Western Canada. Mm-hmm. And after 18 years of that and all the churches out west being established, the Pope said, all right, go east. So every weekend of my life, my dad has traveled to serve communities of worship where they had a congregation because there was all these immigrant families, but they had no one to lead them in worship and no one to lead them in prayer. So all the churches out west, which are now like huge, booming churches, my father built. So every weekend of my life, he would rotate. He would travel to different cities to serve different immigrant communities. Yeah.
Holy cow, that's so neat.
Yeah. And
Did
so
you
now
guys
he's in the
travel a
same
lot
year.
with him during that time?
Yes. Yes and no. So on the weekends during the school year and stuff, mommy held it down while dad was traveling on the weekends. But he would come back Saturday evening, go to church for a Saturday evening service at church, and then do the Sunday service and be in the city that we lived in during the week. And then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, he would travel again.
Okay.
And then in the summer times, we would go on long road trips.
He's busy man.
Yeah.
So it must be
girls
nice.
in the parlor love him.
Do
Everyone in
they?
the city loves him.
Oh, we need to meet him.
Yeah. People stop him everywhere. And they're like, you're Verena's dad. It makes him so happy.
That's so
That
amazing.
is
I hope we run
lovely.
into him and can say that.
He'll be like, God bless you. Thank you.
That's so nice.
It was nice to meet you. Yeah.
So it must be so fulfilling for you guys to have seen what's been built out west and now coming here from a young age and kind of seeing that community evolve here in the East Coast. That's really cool.
It's a huge part of why I am the way I am. Because growing up, I watched my parents' entire lives be dedicated to serving other people. So we didn't have much, but we never went without. And our home always had extra rooms for people to live in, people we've never met before. Like some people from Egypt or Sudan would call my parents and say, hey, my kid's coming to university out there, or this person so-and-so from this city is moving to your city. And we picked them up from the airport and they'd stay with us until they could find a place to stay. Or like dad would help them find accommodation and jobs. And, you know, my mom still, like she's in her 60s. Up until recently, she still worked 2 jobs.
Wow.
While like making meals for the older couples in our church for like weekly to make sure they don't go without, like just this, all the service that no one sees. These are things that they don't share.
Yeah.
They don't even need that recognition. They just do it out of
Yeah.
their heart.
But I grew up with seeing that as being like your purpose is you are given with responsibility. And so it's on you to give.
That's
Right?
really
And
nice.
it's a joyful thing. It's always been a joyful thing. Have you read The 4 Agreements by Miguel Ruiz?
No.
So, and I thought of it when you were speaking, Sarah, and I feel like it's something you would appreciate. He talks about 4 principles, essentially. And I gift this book a lot. I gifted it to Vicky. Like it's interesting. I gift it to people who are really special to me. He talks about 4 principles. 1, being always do your best. So it's ancient, I think it's Toltec wisdom.
Okay.
I could be mistaken, but he's phenomenal and you need to read this book. So the first one is always do your best. The second is don't make assumptions. I'm trying to think of the other two. It's escaped me, of course, because I'm on the spot and I have to speak them.
I just pulled them up.
Sarah's got it. She's
Be impeccable with your word.
Be impeccable with your word.
That's a good one.
So that took me years to just meditate on. Be impeccable with your word. You know when you're younger, speaking of coming into yourself, I'm sorry, I'm kind of taking this somewhere else right now, but earlier we were talking about the challenges of coming into yourself as a woman. And part of that, and I think that there's even more complexity with being a woman of color, is learning to say no. Right? And especially from a cultural background where there are things that are just expected of you. Right? And so I didn't know how to say no. And so you're consistently compromising yourself because you're just saying, okay, yeah, I could do that. Sure. And then when you're absolutely not in a good state, you flake. Be impeccable with your word, right? So now when I'm asked to engage in something,
this is resonating.
so asking to do something, even when I respond yes or no, I don't do that lightly.
Yeah.
You take it seriously.
I take it seriously because how often do you run into people, oh, we should go for a call. Yeah. Listen.
Yeah.
Say what you mean and mean what you say.
Yeah.
Say what you mean and mean what you say. Be intentional with your words. Be impeccable with your... I love that principle. And this is where don't make assumptions comes in with that principle. Check your ego.
Actually, the fourth of the 4 agreements is don't take
anything personally. Yes. Don't take anything personally.
I think that's so hard for people to do.
Don't make assumptions and don't take anything personally are the 2 principles that struck the hardest with me. Because when we take things personally, we make things about us.
Yeah.
Ashley, if you have not been returning my calls, if you and I would normally speak every day and you stop returning my calls, I could catch feelings and say, man, that woman, I thought she was my friend. She's a deadbeat friend. She's not answering my calls. I'm making it about me.
Right.
You could be grieving. You could be of ill health. But I'm making an assumption because I can't check my own ego. Humans are fickle. And we're going to hurt and disappoint each other. Intentionally, unintentionally. It's going to happen.
Yeah, over time.
I'm going to hurt you. You're going to hurt me. But I need to know that when I hurt you, instead of making assumptions or taking things personally, you're going to love me enough to talk to me. And not talk about me.
Yeah.
Come to me. But I also have to be humble enough to receive that. And to not have my gloves up when conflict comes. Because how people resolve conflict tells you everything about the relationship. Everything. So if you don't have a friendship where you feel safe to bring up something that might feel a little controversial, you need to ask yourself how safe you are in that friendship. And how good of a friend are you?
It's very interesting.
Not put it all in them.
Because this same friend who I love, she's come to me before with things that I've heard her, and I've heard her before unintentionally. And when she came to me about them, I was so hurt, but I wasn't hurt at her. I was hurt. Like, how could I do that to my friend? I'm so sorry I hurt you. Not I didn't mean to, and, well, didn't you think I was going through this? No, I'm not making excuses. I'm so sorry I hurt you. I didn't even notice. So we need to be in friendships that foster that, but I also need to be a good friend who's teachable.
I think it goes back to, like, being impeccable with your word and not taking things personally, as we were talking about kind of those 4 agreements. It is being able to have those hard conversations, but really being truly able to say what's on your heart without it carrying intent or emotion. Like it's not meant to attack. It's truly
like
meant
honesty.
This is where I am right now. And I think if you're in that kind of safe relationship or you have that, you know that other person's not going to take this personally.
And that brings in the 4th principle, which is always do your best.
Yeah.
And the always do your best goes back to what we started out talking about with protecting our space. Maybe part of the reason you're not engaging with some of these people who will say, oh, I want to go for coffee, but they don't actually want to go for coffee. is because you give your best to the relationships in your life.
Yeah.
And why settle for friendships where you're both not doing that? And there are going to be periods where you may not be able to give 100%, where you're hurting.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be periods where the other party is the same, but you all have to love each other through it. And conflict resolution it's a topic that's so dear to my heart because we don't know how to do it. In the age of social media, everyone is so polarized. And instead of talking to each other, they'll call each other out.
Yeah, it's so
and they'll
weird.
just shame people. And public shaming, that's a term from back in the day when people be publicly executed
Mm-hmm.
for their crimes. And nowadays, we treat people like criminals on the internet, and we're the judges with our thumbs. And we'll shame people and call them out, or do so while texting, talking about them to someone else. But we won't talk to them.
It's so easy. I think that's why people do it, to say things because they can't confront them face on, things that might be bothering you. It's like you said before, it's hard to do face to face, but don't do it over text.
We
or
need to
phone.
do better. We need to do better. And if you can't have conversations about conflict, you shouldn't even be on the internet. You shouldn't even have access.
We need to tell that to the
I don't know. I feel like a lot of my
country
memes
below.
are
You shouldn't even have access to social media. And this cancel culture is so toxic. It's so toxic the way we are so polarized. But if we all had a little more compassion, it'd be so easy for me to label someone who has wronged me as racist. Instead of saying, that was racist. When you called me this, that was racist.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as I place a label on the person, I'm going into the conversation polarized, and I'm not leaving room for conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But if I approach things, and that's hard, it's hard and it's taxing, especially on like people who are marginalized every day.
Yeah.
That gets old, right?
Yeah.
But if we all have a little more compassion, that wouldn't be as difficult.
Yeah, and I think it does go back to that always do your best. We can't always, none of us are perfect. And if you hold someone to the standard of what you think they need to be performing at or acting like on this particular subject that's important to you, like that might not even be something they're aware of, right? And it's not something they're doing maliciously, or they just truly cannot do any better at this moment, and that's not something that they're aware of. But to be able to have kind of an open conversation on a topic or talk about why this was a hurtful interaction is so important without coming in assuming that they've wronged you from the beginning.
Blazing,
yeah, because sometimes, yes, certainly people are coming in with malintent, but a lot of time people are also just trying to do their best, and it's just outside of their realm of awareness at that moment.
And even when there is malintent, there's more behind that.
Yes.
There's more behind that. Jeff Perera talks about this one incident when he was young. And his father and his mother were in a car in the parking lot in a grocery store or something. And another driver was really racially aggressive. I think it was racially aggressive. It's been a while since I've listened to it. I need to refresh. Towards his dad. And for the first time in his life, he saw his dad scared. And he realized, this whole time, Daddy who's angry is actually Daddy who's scared. And he was a child, and he remembers this so vividly. And that's very difficult. That's a very difficult perspective to have as a woman if you're a woman who's survived assault or abuse or mistreatment. But our society breeds this. When people say they're having a boy, the reception's usually, "Oh, you're so lucky you're not having a girl." Why? We put so much more effort into the moral code of our daughters. We raise empathetic, women. That's not to say that there aren't men who are empathetic, but a lot of that for men is learned later.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm just like thinking of some of my friends, and I think it is good that it is a conversation, because I've seen in a lot of my friends in the last 5 years for sure, putting a real conscious effort into understanding their actions, I think, and even just consciously being aware of the impact of things they wouldn't think twice of, even just expressions or things like that, just how they can change those and maybe the meaning behind them, which is really kind of shout out to them.
So this is part of the conversation that Tyler Simmonds and I had on the podcast, the short podcast episode that we did last year with BZLY, was about this, because Tyler and I have been friends for a long time, and he's able now to reflect on things that he's not proud of in terms of like his view of masculinity before, and about how he's grown and matured in his masculinity. And he's very open about that. And Jeff references the same theme on that podcast episode, because this whole trend with cancel culture doesn't leave room for people to come forward to say, I have this problematic view or tendency, or I'm embarrassed or ashamed that I once did this. People can't come forward, because if they come forward, you're canceled. Yeah. There's no compassion. But when there's compassion, we can have healing conversations. It took me a long time to realize that I was raised in a very homophobic culture. And one of the closest people to me is gay and from the same country. And I'll never forget when they came out to me. I cried and I cried and I cried, and I didn't cry because they were gay. I cried because my first reaction was, did I ever make you feel like I would love you any less? How do I make you feel? And I'd never made homophobic remarks. But it made me I have chills, because it made me so much more acutely aware. How do I make people feel
that you're not aware of?
And this is so true. Like, this hits close to home for me, because the amount of racial microaggressions I deal with all the time, people don't notice that they say hurtful things. And it takes so much emotional labor, mental capacity to call that stuff out. Like, I just don't have the energy. You have to pick your battles. I know. Right? But it's such an important conversation to have with ourselves, is how do I make people feel?
Thanks so much for listening. We love hearing from you. So please let us know what you think. You can email us at rivalandqueen@gmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe and even leave a review. You can find us on all social handles at Rival and Queen. Thanks, guys.